The orphan girl stood trembling as family after family walked past her. Nobody wanted her. Tears filled her eyes as the last hope faded away. Then a quiet Apache man in the back raised his hand and said 4 words that changed her life forever. They didn't just ignore her. They refused her, over and over again, and the worst part? She was standing right in front of them. If you think that's painful, wait until you hear what happened next. The lights were too bright for her small eyes. She blinked quickly, trying not to cry, not here, not again, because she already knew how this usually ends, a room full of people, soft music playing, smiles everywhere, except none of those smiles were for her. She stood on the edge of the stage, tiny, fragile, almost invisible. Her shoes didn't quite fit. Her dress was neat, but old, and her hands, they wouldn't stop shaking, so she held them together tight. Like if she just stayed still enough, maybe someone would finally notice her. Maybe someone would finally choose her. You'd think it only takes one person, just one, but somehow, not even one did. Not the couple in the front row whispering to each other. Not the woman smiling at every other child. Not the man who raised his hand just minutes ago. But only for someone else, because that's how it always went. Hope, then silence, then disappointment again and again and again. But this time felt different, because this time, everyone was watching. This wasn't a quiet visit. This wasn't behind closed doors. This was public, a stage, an audience. A moment she couldn't escape, and that made it worse, because rejection in private hurts. But rejection in front of everyone? That stays with you forever. She took a small step forward. Not confident, not brave, just desperate. Her eyes scanned the room one more time, looking for something, anything. A smile, a nod, a hand, but what she found instead was avoidance. People looking down, looking away, pretending not to see, like if they didn't make eye contact, they wouldn't have to feel guilty. And right there, something inside her started to break, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, the kind of breaking no one notices, except the one feeling it. Her lips pressed together, her breathing slowed, and her eyes, they stopped searching, because deep down, she finally understood. It wasn't that they didn't see her, it's that they chose not to. And that realization, that's heavier than rejection. That's the moment hope starts to disappear. The room grew quieter, uncomfortably quiet. Even the music seemed too loud now, too fake, too happy for a moment like this. Then came the voice. Bright, forced, trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Come on, anyone? She's a very sweet girl. But the words didn't help, because sweet wasn't enough. Good wasn't enough. Being quiet, being kind, being patient, none of it was enough. Not for them, not today, not ever, and now. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a pause anymore. This was rejection, clear, visible, undeniable, and she felt all of it. Every second, every silence, every pair of eyes that refused to meet hers. She lowered her head slightly, not fully, just enough to hide her eyes, because if no one wanted her, at least they wouldn't see her cry. And right before she gave up, right before the moment completely collapsed, something shifted. A sound, soft, but sharp enough to cut through the silence. A chair moving, not from the front, not from the middle, from the back where no one was looking. And in that exact moment, without anyone realizing it yet, everything was about to change. Her name was Lila, 8 years old. But if you looked into her eyes, you wouldn't see a child. You'd see someone who had already learned what it feels like to be left behind, to be forgotten, to stop expecting anything at all. Because Lila didn't just arrive at the orphanage one day. She stayed, longer than anyone else. Kids came and went. Some stayed for weeks, some for months. But Lila? Years. She watched birthdays pass that weren't hers. She watched new children cry, then leave before they even unpacked fully. She watched beds fill, then empty again, except hers. Her bed never changed. Same corner, same thin blanket, same quiet space that slowly started to feel permanent, like she belonged there. And nowhere else. At first, she didn't understand. Every time someone walked into the orphanage, well-dressed, smiling, hopeful, her heart would race. She would fix her hair quickly, stand a little straighter, try to look Chosen. Because that's what the other kids did, and it worked. For them. She saw it happen again and again. A couple walks in. They look around. Their eyes stop on someone. And just like that, a life changes. A child leaves, holding someone's hand, smiling. Chosen, and every single time. Lila believed she could be next. She had to believe it, because what happens when a child stops hoping? So she tried. In her own quiet way, she never pushed forward, never shouted, never begged. Instead, she waited, patiently, politely, like she didn't want to be a burden, like she didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. Because somewhere along the way, Lila learned something dangerous. If you're too much, people leave, so she made herself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. And over time, it worked too well, because people didn't just overlook her noise. They overlooked her completely. There were days when visitors didn't even realize she was there, days when she stood in the same room. And no one said a single word to her, not because she did something wrong, but because she didn't do anything at all. And that became her pattern. Hope. Wait, disappear. Hope. Wait, disappear until hope itself started to feel unfamiliar, but still. There was one thing she never stopped doing every adoption day. She wore her best dress. It wasn't new, it wasn't perfect, but to her, it mattered because it meant she was still trying, still believing. Just a little. She would smooth it down carefully, fix her hair in front of a small mirror, practice a tiny smile. Not too big, not too confident, just enough to seem worth noticing, and then she would wait. Again, and again, and again. But each time she walked back alone, something inside her got quieter. Not broken, not yet, just softer, like her heart was slowly learning not to expect footsteps coming back for her. And that's what made today different, because today wasn't just another visit. Today was public, a stage, an audience, a moment where she couldn't quietly disappear into the background, where she couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Today, everyone would know whether she was chosen or not, and deep down, Lila felt it, that heavy sinking feeling in her chest, the one that whispers, "This will be the same." But still, she showed up, same dress, same quiet hope, because even after everything, even after years of being overlooked, a small part of her still believed. Maybe this time, someone would finally see her, and that tiny piece of hope, that fragile, almost invisible hope, was about to be tested more than ever before. The room didn't feel real anymore. To Lila, it felt like standing inside a dream that slowly turned into something heavier, something colder, something that didn't want her there. She stood on the small stage, not in the center, never the center, always slightly to the side, like even the space itself didn't fully accept her presence. The lights above were bright, almost too bright. They made everything visible, every movement, every hesitation, every breath she tried to control. Below her, the audience sat in neat rows. Well-dressed people, comfortable people, people who didn't have to wonder what it felt like to be unwanted. And then came the moment. The host smiled, a practiced smile, the kind that tries to make everything feel normal. "Now we'll continue with the adoption introductions," he said warmly. Applause followed, light, polite, empty. One child was called forward, then another, then another. Each time, something incredible happened. Hands went up, smiles appeared, whispers of "we like her" or "he looks perfect" moved through the crowd like gentle waves. And each time a child was chosen, they didn't walk. They ran, straight into someone's arms, straight into a future. Lila watched all of it, quietly, still. Her fingers curled tighter and tighter together, because every time it happened, it reminded her of what she never had, what she might never get. And then, her name was called. Lila. The sound hit differently. Not because it was special, but because it wasn't. It was just another name, just another moment, just another chance. That might end the same way as always. She stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like the floor might reject her if she moved too fast. Her shoes made soft sounds against the stage. Tap, tap, tap. Too loud in her ears. Not loud enough in the room. She stopped at the center and waited. This was the moment. The moment everything depended on. The moment where someone would either see her or not. Her heart beat faster. She looked at the front row first. A couple smiled at another child nearby. Not her. She looked at the second row. A woman leaned toward a boy sitting beside her. Not her. She looked again. Left. Right. Every direction showed the same thing. Interest. But not for her. And then, it happened. The silence. Not the calm kind, the heavy kind. The kind that tells you something is wrong without saying a word. No one raised a hand. No one leaned forward. No one whispered her name. It was like she had become invisible in real time. And that's when the humiliation began. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, painfully, in the spaces between seconds. The host cleared his throat, once, twice, trying to keep the moment alive, trying to fix what everyone could already feel breaking. Lila is a very quiet and well-behaved child, he said, forcing brightness into his voice. A pause. Nothing changed. He smiled again. Anyone interested? The words hung there, useless, unanswered. And in that moment, Lila understood something without being told. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't delay. This was rejection. Clear, simple, final. Her fingers trembled harder now. Her eyes started to sting, but she didn't cry. Not yet, because crying would make it real, and part of her still hoped, still foolishly hoped, that someone would speak, that someone would lift a hand, that someone would say her name differently this time. But no one did. Instead, people shifted in their seats, looked down, looked away, like not seeing her would make the moment easier. And that hurt more than anything. Because it wasn't anger, it wasn't cruelty, it was indifference. And indifference is heavier than rejection. The host forced another small laugh, trying to soften the silence, trying to hide the truth. But there was no hiding it now. Not anymore. Lila lowered her head slightly, just enough to hide her eyes. Because if they didn't want her, then she didn't want them to see her break. But inside, something was already breaking. Quietly. Completely. And as the silence stretched longer than it should have, no one noticed the man at the back of the room, slowly moving his chair, slowly standing up, slowly raising his hand. And the entire room, without knowing it yet, was about to change forever. The silence in the room had become unbearable, not because it was loud, but because it was complete. No whispers, no movement, no one stepping forward, just the heavy, awkward truth sitting in the air. She wasn't chosen. Again. Lila stood still at the center of the stage, but inside, she no longer felt like she was standing. It felt like sinking. Slowly, quietly, into something she couldn't escape. Her eyes stayed lowered now, not fully closed, but no longer searching either. Because searching hurt more than finding nothing. The host shifted uncomfortably beside her. He had run out of words, ran out of smiles, ran out of ways to make silence feel less cruel. He opened his mouth once, closed it again. Nothing worked. The audience, too, had changed. The earlier excitement was gone. Now there was only discomfort. People pretending to adjust their clothes, checking watches, looking anywhere except the stage. Because everyone knew what was happening, and no one wanted to be responsible for it. Not openly, not visibly, but somewhere in the back row. Something changed. A sound, barely noticeable at first. A chair, dragging slowly against the floor. It was subtle, almost ignored. But Lila heard it, not with her ears, with something deeper, something that still hadn't given up completely. The host didn't notice. The audience didn't notice. But someone was standing, from the back, where the lights didn't reach properly, where people weren't supposed to matter. A man, not dressed like the others, not smiling like the others, not shifting uncomfortably like the others. He stood still, completely still, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. The room didn't react yet, because no one was looking there, not yet. He took one slow step forward, then another. No rush, no hesitation, like he wasn't reacting to the moment, but had already decided it long ago. The host finally noticed movement. He turned slightly. Confused. "Sir?" he said, unsure. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes stayed fixed on the girl, on Lila. Not the crowd, not the stage, just her. For the first time in a long time, someone was actually looking at her, not through her, not past her, at her. The man's presence changed the atmosphere, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Like something heavy had entered the room and everyone suddenly felt it without knowing why. He raised his hand, slowly, calmly, not like someone asking permission, but like someone who had already made a decision. The host blinked. "Your bid?" he asked, still trying to understand. The man didn't look at him, still didn't. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet, but it carried across the entire room. Not loud, not forced, certain. "I'll take her." A pause. The words didn't fully register at first. The audience didn't react immediately, because it wasn't what they expected. Not at all. People leaned forward slightly, trying to understand, trying to process. The host looked confused. "Sir, I think you may have misunderstood. This is an adoption introduction event." But the man raised his hand slightly. Not aggressive, not interrupting, just enough to stop everything. The room fell into a deeper silence. And then, he spoke again. 3 words. Not rushed, not emotional, just steady, clear, final. Once. Mine. Forever. Something shifted in the room. Not physically, but emotionally, like the entire space had just been redefined. Lila slowly lifted her head, confused, uncertain, because no one had ever spoken about her like that before. Not once. Not ever. Mine. She whispered it in her mind, like she didn't understand the language, like it wasn't meant for her. The man didn't move, didn't smile, didn't explain. He simply stood there, waiting, as if the rest of the world no longer mattered. And for the first time in her life, Lila wasn't invisible anymore. Someone had chosen her, and everything that came before this moment was about to disappear. For a moment, no one moved, not the audience, not the host, not even Lila. It was like the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. The words still hung in the air. Once. Mine. Forever. They didn't sound real, not to her, not to anyone. Lila stood frozen. At the center of the stage, her small hands trembled, slightly at her sides, but something else was happening now. Something unfamiliar, because for the first time, no one was ignoring her. The man from the back still stood there, still calm, still certain he wasn't looking around anymore. He was only looking at her. And that was the strangest part, because Lila didn't know what to do with being seen. She had learned how to be invisible, how to shrink herself, how to wait quietly, until no one looked at her anymore. But being seen? That felt heavier, almost frightening. The host finally cleared his throat, trying to recover control of the moment. "Sir, are you confirming your choice?" he asked carefully. The man nodded once, that was all. No explanation, no hesitation, just certainty. And somehow, that was more powerful than anything else in the room. A few murmurs started in the audience, confused voices, uncertain reactions. People couldn't understand it. Why her? Why the girl no one picked? But the man didn't respond to them. He didn't need to. Instead, he took one slow step forward, then another. Not rushing, not forcing, just moving closer, like He was approaching something fragile, something important, something real. Lila's eyes followed him now, carefully, warily. Her heart didn't know what to do, because this wasn't rejection, but it didn't feel like acceptance yet either. It felt unfamiliar, dangerous in a way she couldn't explain. The man stopped a few steps away from the stage, not too close, not too far, just enough for her to see him clearly. And for the first time, Lila noticed something different about him. He wasn't smiling, not like the others, not like the fake kindness she had seen before. There was no performance in his face, no pressure, no expectation, just calm presence, like he wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything. He simply meant it. Slowly, he lowered his hand, not pointing anymore, not signaling, just resting it at his side, and then he spoke. Again, but softer this time, not for the crowd, only for her. You don't have to be afraid. The words hit differently, because no one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. Not with that tone. Not with that certainty. Lila's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her throat felt tight, like her body didn't know how to respond to kindness without conditions. She swallowed hard. The man didn't move closer. He didn't rush her. He didn't demand anything. He just waited, and that waiting was new, because she was used to being rushed, used to being overlooked, used to being forgotten. But this was different. This was patience. The host looked uncertain now. The audience remained silent. No one interrupted anymore. Even they could feel it. Something had shifted, not in the room, but in her. Lila looked down for a moment, then back up, then down again. Her fingers curled slightly. She didn't understand what was happening inside her chest. It felt tight, warm, scary. Hope, maybe, but hope was dangerous. Hope always left her alone in the end, and yet she took a small step forward, barely visible but real. The man didn't react. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just stayed still. So she took another step and another, slowly, carefully, like she was crossing something invisible, something fragile. The distance between them began to close, not quickly, not dramatically, but meaningfully, and with every step she took, something inside her loosened, something she had held for years, something heavy, something quiet, something painful. And for the first time in her life, Lila wasn't walking away from rejection. She was walking towards something she didn't yet understand, but somehow, deep down, she didn't want to turn back. Not this time. Lila stopped walking. Just for a moment. One small pause in the middle of everything, because she didn't know what came. Next, every instinct in her body told her to stop, to go, back to protect herself before it hurt. Again, because this was the moment before disappointment. It always was. But something was different this time. The man didn't move. He didn't rush her. He didn't call her back. He didn't change his mind. He simply stood there, waiting, like her decision mattered, and that was what made everything harder, because no one had ever waited for her before, not like this, not ever. Lila's eyes flickered toward the floor again, then slowly back up. Her breathing was uneven now, small, careful, like she was afraid even air might break the moment. Behind her, the audience stayed silent, not uncomfortable anymore, just watching. Even they understood something important was happening, something fragile, something real. The host had stopped speaking, completely. There were no announcements now, no explanations, just space, space for her. And for the first time, Lila was not being pushed forward. She was being given a choice, a real one. Her fingers curled tightly again. Old habit, fear, protection. But inside her chest, something else was growing, not loud, not strong, just persistent. A feeling she had buried for years, a feeling that whispered, what if this time it's not a trick? What if this time someone stays? She swallowed hard, her throat hurt, her eyes stung. And then she moved one, step small, uncertain, but real. The man didn't react, still no pressure, still no command, only presence. So she took another step, then another, each one heavier than the last. Not because she didn't want to move forward, but because moving forward meant believing, and believing had always been dangerous. But now, it felt unavoidable. The distance between them grew smaller, until finally, she stood only a few steps away, close enough to see him, clearly close enough to feel something she had never felt before: safety. Not loud safety, not perfect safety, but quiet safety, the kind that doesn't demand anything in return. The man slowly lowered his gaze to meet hers, not towering, not intimidating, just equal. And then he spoke again, softly. "This is your choice." Lila blinked, confused, because no one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. A choice? Her? She wasn't used to choices. She was used to outcomes. Used to being placed. Used to being forgotten. Used to being left behind. But now she was being asked. Her lips parted slightly. "No." Sound came, her eyes filled slowly. Not from sadness, from confusion, from disbelief, from something breaking open inside her. She looked at him. Really. Looked, and for the first time, she didn't see rejection. She didn't see judgment. She didn't see fear. She saw stillness and kindness that didn't feel temporary. Her small voice finally came out, barely above a whisper. Me, that single word carried everything: years of being unwanted, years of silence, years of waiting. The man nodded. Once, simple, certain, yes, that was it. No conditions, no hesitation, no expectations, just yes. And something inside Lila finally collapsed, not in pain but in release. Her hands trembled, harder now. Her breath broke, and then she stepped forward, fully into him. Not cautiously this time, not halfway, completely. The moment she did, the world didn't explode, nothing dramatic happened. No applause, no music, no celebration, just quiet. But in that quiet, Lila finally felt it, arms around her, not pulling away, not letting go, holding, got steady, real. Her body froze at first because it didn't know what safety felt like. But slowly, very slowly, she let herself breathe, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was waiting to be left behind. Because this time, someone stayed. Part 7, The Aftermath, When Silence Turns into Meaning, 700 words. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Not the audience, not the host, not even the man holding Lila. It was as if the world itself didn't know what to do with what just happened. A child who had been invisible was now in someone's arms. Not chosen in hesitation, not chosen out of pity, but chosen with certainty. And that changed everything. Lila stayed still at first. Her small hands barely moved. Her body didn't fully understand what was happening yet. Because safety was not something she had experienced enough to recognize. It felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. Like a dream she might wake up from at any second. The man didn't speak. He didn't loosen his hold. He didn't look around for approval. He simply stayed there. Grounded, present, as if nothing else in the room mattered anymore. And slowly, something shifted in the audience. At first it was subtle. A few people straightened in their seats. A few exchanged quiet glances. Not judgment anymore. Not confusion. Something else. Recognition. Because what they had witnessed wasn't just an adoption moment. It was something deeper. Something that made them uncomfortable in a different way. Not because it was wrong, but because it exposed something true. The host cleared his throat again. But this time, no words came. He looked down, then away. Even he didn't know how to continue. The structure of the event suddenly felt meaningless. Announcements didn't matter anymore. Names didn't matter anymore. Because one moment had rewritten everything. A girl no one chose. Had been chosen completely. Lila finally blinked, slowly. Her head tilted slightly against the man's shoulder. Still unsure. Still processing. Her fingers loosened just a little. Not fully relaxed, but no longer trembling as violently. And that was the first change. Small, quiet, but real. The man's hand moved gently. Just once, a simple, careful motion. Not to control, but to reassure. And somehow, that was enough. A few people in the crowd looked down, not out of boredom, but reflection. Something about what they saw made them uncomfortable in a way they couldn't easily explain, because deep down, they knew. They had all seen her. They had all had the chance, and they had all chosen not to. One woman in the second row pressed her lips together. A man near the aisle looked away completely. Another shifted uncomfortably in his seat. No one spoke. But guilt doesn't always need words. Sometimes silence carries it better. The host finally stepped back slightly, like he was no longer part of the moment. Because he wasn't, this was no longer an event. It was something else. Something personal. Something irreversible. Lila's breathing slowed, just a little. Her eyes were still open, but softer now, less afraid, more uncertain in a different way. Not, will I be rejected, but what happens now? Because this was unfamiliar territory. Being chosen didn't come with instructions, and for someone like her, that was scarier than rejection. The man finally spoke again, very softly. You're safe now. 3 words. Simple. But they landed differently. Not like promises she had heard before. Not like empty comfort, but like something grounded, something real, something final. Lila didn't respond. She couldn't, because her throat tightened again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something she didn't yet have a name for. Relief. Slowly, the tension in her shoulders eased just a little more. Not gone, but less heavy. The world around them still existed, the chairs, the people, the silence. But none of it felt like it mattered anymore, because in that moment, everything that defined her life before, the waiting, the rejection, the invisibility, it all started to lose its weight, not instantly, but undeniably. And as she stayed there, held, seen, chosen, something inside her quietly changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently, because for the first time in her life, Lila didn't feel like she was surviving the world. She felt like she might finally belong in it. The room stayed silent, but it was no longer the same silence as before. Earlier, silence meant rejection. Now, silence meant understanding. Lila was still in his arms, still unsure how to fully believe what had just happened, because moments like this didn't exist in her memory. No file in her mind said, "This is where you are chosen and they stay." That page had always been blank. The man finally turned slightly, not away from her, but toward the exit. And that small movement carried something powerful. A direction, a future, a leaving. That wasn't abandonment. It was arrival somewhere new. Lila looked up just a little, her eyes still wet, still confused, still healing. She didn't speak, but her fingers slowly tightened around his sleeve. Not out of fear this time, but out of something new. Fear of losing it. The man noticed. He didn't react loudly, didn't make it a moment. He simply adjusted his hold slightly, more secure, more steady, like a promise without words. Behind them, the host finally spoke again. But his voice was different now, quieter, almost humbled. Registration will be completed after the event. But even he understood. The event had already ended. What came after was just paperwork. The real moment had already passed. A few people in the audience stood slowly, not clapping, not cheering, just reflecting. Some avoided eye contact with the stage completely, because what they had witnessed wasn't entertainment. It was truth, a truth that lingered uncomfortably in their minds. She was always there, and they never chose her. The man reached the exit doors. Light from outside spilled in, soft, warm, different from the harsh brightness of the room behind them. Lila hesitated for just a second. Her small body paused again. Conditioning tried to pull her back. The fear of, What if this changes? Flickered again. But the man spoke softly, not looking back. We're going home. That word, home. It didn't belong in her vocabulary. Not really. Not for her. But something about the way he said it made it feel possible. So she didn't stop this time. She stepped forward and walked out. The doors closed behind them, not with a dramatic sound, but with quiet finality. And just like that, the world she had always known ended. Outside, the air felt different, not because it was special, but because it was new. Lila stayed close, not letting go. Not yet, because she didn't know what came next. But for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. The man looked ahead. Steady. Calm. And as they walked forward together, something simple became true. Not spoken. Not announced, but real. She had been forgotten by everyone, until one quiet decision changed everything. And in that moment, a girl no one picked finally became someone's forever.